Hello everyone, my name is Lowko and welcome to another professional match of StarCraft 2. What I got for you today is a really exciting match of Terran versus Terran, and the reason why I'm really hyped for this is because of the players spawning here in the bottom left hand corner of Lost and Found LE. And yes, this is going to be a map that recently got added with the new latter season of StarCraft 2, meaning that this game was played literally just a couple of days ago. Spawning here in the bottom left hand corner of the map and playing with the red Terran SCVs, he's one of the most successful StarCraft 2 players of all time. In particular, in between 2011 and 2015, this man right here dominated the scene. We have none other than MMA, and I'm sure that some of you will recognize that nickname. And his opponent, spawning all the way in the top right hand corner of the map, he's definitely one of the best Terran players on the planet right now. Now, while he may get overshadowed by, for example, Maru or, for example, Innovation, there is no denying that this man right here with the blue Terran SCVs is an absolute monster. We have none other than Alive. So this is an interesting one. So let's talk about these players for just a little bit. Alive over the last couple of years has earned roughly $200,000 in prize money alone. He never really took a break as far as I'm aware. He's just always played. He's always been really good. And while he always seems to get overshadowed by some of these other Terran players, he's always a force to be reckoned with. Now MMA, he dominated in between 2011 and 2015. As a matter of fact, he earned roughly $400,000 in prize money alone during that time period. And of course, that does not include team salaries, that does not include sponsorships and any of that kind of shenanigans. However, as you may be aware, there is a compulsory military service over in South Korea. And in the beginning of 2016, MMA decided to begin his 22-month service. Now, more often than not, when pro gamers are finished with their service, they decide to either, like, you know, jump into a quote-unquote regular job, or maybe they become like a live streamer. I've heard of that a couple of times. Or maybe they become like an esports coach, or they start helping out other players improve in their games as well, because obviously they've got a lot of tournament experience. However, MMA, I would say about a half year or so ago, decided that he wanted to get back into pro gaming in StarCraft 2. Very excited. Now, a couple of times where pro gamers did try to do that, and when they did try to come back into the game, they've really never been super impressive. I mean, the game changes a lot in just a couple of years' time, and obviously the fact of the matter is that when players age, they're not going to be as fast anymore. I mean, MMA right now is 29 years old, which in pro gaming terms is actually rather old. In particular, in StarCraft 1 and Brood War, pros would retire at like age 25 or something along those lines, like super early on. But MMA so far seems to be once again on top of the game, and he's playing really well in the recent games that I've seen him compete, in particular in online tournaments. So I figured it would be time to start covering him on YouTube as well, because there's no denying that the man has a lot of potential. Plus, you know, he's one of my personal favorites of all time. Anyways, let's have a look. Looks like both players are opening up pretty standardly, although MMA is going for that little bit of a faster economy focused build, going for the quicker command center and then obviously also the orbital command, whereas on the other side of the map we see Alive opening up with a bit of a later CC on the low ground, but then the 1-1-1 style, indicating that Alive is going to be the one who plans on being the aggressor in this particular game. Now, the one Hellion near the front here is trying to bait the Hellions from the main base away. MMA does now need to deal with a couple of those Hellions here. At the same time, apparently the Hellion at the front will be picked off as well. It looks like one SCV there ended up going down, but for that, two Reapers had to pay the price. And I guess the Hellion near the front also ended up dying. So not the cleanest early game here from Alive. Definitely putting MMA in a really solid position. Now, TVT is an interesting matchup. It's very complicated, and these days it's perfectly viable to play either Bio or Mech. And I would love to see, you know, both options here from players, actually. It'd be really cool to see like a Mech versus Bio style. Most players do benefit from playing Bio quite a bit more. Now, actually, Alive is running very low there on that one Cyclone, but running back to the safety of the bunker, apparently that is enough for MMA to go back home once again as well. Banshee coming up here for Alive. He is now transitioning towards Bio, which I would probably consider to be the standard right now. Now, by the way, the cloaking field on these Banshees is coming up here too, so nothing all too crazy for Alive. He's just planning to harass his opponent for a little while longer. Not really focusing on that economy as much, but there's no denying right now that Alive is gonna go for that Bio-based style. Whereas on the other side of the map, and I love this, MMA is now adding on additional factories. Really cool. So I think we're gonna be having that bio versus mech-based style. We'll talk about that in just a little bit because it looks like the Banshee has now made its way across the map. And we'll now find out that apparently a third command center is already coming up here for our Terran player in red. And yeah, it will be able to get the pick off on that one very, very easily. Now there are missile turrets here ready to go. MMA did decide to go for a very quick... what is it called? Engineering bay, just to be safe against this kind of shenanigans. There's now also enough energy available on this orbital command to scan this one down, although, while it hasn't killed a lot, there we go, we do see the lock on here. While this Banshee hasn't killed a lot, I mean, it did force out the missile turrets indirectly, and it also forced out, of course, the scan there. And a scan, every single scan that you see is not a mule, so as long as you keep scanning, it kind of already pays for these Banshees just by forcing those scans out. Alive may very well be able to pick up one of these Hellions, though. There we go. One of the Hellions will be picked off as well. And the second Banshee may very well try to get into that main mineral line. Now, once again, I would be very surprised if it gets any workers, but ideally what Alive is looking for here is like 1 or 2 scans and, you know, then still scoot away with the Banshee. Here we go. First scan being activated. That's 300 minerals right there down the drain. Will it be able to get on out of there? It does look like that will be the case, and that's 3 scans right there for 2 Banshees with Cloak, and of course also 2 missile turrets. All things considered, definitely a very solid setup. So here's the plan for Alive. Alive is playing that bio-based Terran style, whereas we see MMA going for the mechanical army instead, based around Hellions, siege tanks, Vikings, that kind of thing. Alive is gonna be the one that gets to be significantly more mobile. He can expand all over the map if he wants to, because MMA is gonna be far more passive. However, if MMA manages to max out and get in a really good, powerful position, actually hold that thought, ooh, a couple of those Cyclones actually overextending, they will be picked off there. I guess that's 2 Cyclones for only a single one, but regardless, if MMA manages to max out with his army and get 3-3 research finished and also get his army into a really powerful position, it's practically unstoppable. So MMA's goal is going to be to try and max out, and Alive will try and prevent doing exactly that, and maybe even mass expand to make sure that it can get into a really solid position. Now, the 2 Cyclones are currently in that medevac moving across the map, whereas right over here, even though Alive has not finished up Stimpack and Combat Shield just yet, he's actually seconds from finishing that right now. Alive does decide to just simply move forward, pick up that 1 siege tank, and force the command center with a liftoff. Meanwhile, though, in the main base, Cyclones will be moving from that medevac back into the medevac, just because they are very low on HP, and apparently Alive now showing his Stimpack as well as the combat shield to these medevac units, just to make sure that they are going to be, you know, picked off pretty easily. Actually, 1 Cyclone there does end up dying. That's because of the drop right here inside of that main base as well. Both players microing at several different angles at once, and while this isn't looking terrible here for MMA, I mean, this is a bit of a tricky position to be in because he's not really mining super confidently here whatsoever. SCV is now going back up into that main base once again as well, and while MMA will likely be able to get rid of this army here eventually, one of the siege tanks gets picked off near the front. Now all of a sudden the Marines also find the CC on the left hand side. This is not a good spot to be in if you are the Terran player in red. But this is also wonderfully played so far by Alive. He's really not allowing MMA any kind of wiggle room, and that's exactly what I meant. You really want to try and prevent this Terran player from getting that big eco out, and you really want to try and prevent the meching player to mech it happen, right? You want to prevent them from meching it happen and getting to the point where they are maxed out. Now, apparently the Vikings are going to land. They will be able to pick up the rest of those units, but in the meantime, of course, Alive has been meching up a bigger and bigger army. This is what I love about TVT, though. Like, there's such a variety of units that are viable, and since all of the Terran units can sort of just come out within the first couple of minutes of the game, it feels like, you can have such a wide variety of harassment options, and then in the mid-game, you can transition towards either bio or mech. I mean, it's almost as if you're playing 2 different races all at once, right? I mean, bio and mech, they play out very differently. With bio, you'll be expending a lot more, you'll be a lot more aggressive, you'll be dropping a lot more, you'll be pushing a lot more, whereas with mech, you're going to be playing super safe, and usually you don't really want to take any risks. MMA, though, he's still looking to max out, right? There's no denying he's in a bit of a tough spot right now. Alive more than definitely leading this game so far, but little moves like this with Hellions can definitely change the tide of battle. There we go. A couple of SCVs immediately being picked off. Nicely done there by MMA, and it does look like he will be able to get on out of there with the majority of those units to fight another day as well. I actually love this. This is like a new school addition to TVT, or I guess it's been the case for a while already. Particularly Gumiho started doing this quite a bit with the medevac play when you are playing mech, just to simply harass your opponent a lot more. Now this will be scouted here. here. Beautifully done, actually, by MMA. Trying to prevent his opponent from knowing about this as well. Vikings immediately now trying to see if they can deal the damage here. Hellbats moving into that main base here too, and these medevacs will be picked up with absolute ease. MMA looks to be smashing this engagement so far, while apparently there is a bit of an angle over here for Alive though to tuck himself away in that main base. He will be able to pick up a supply depot and maybe an attachment or two. This was definitely meant to do a whole lot more damage, and these Vikings, they're still hawking on them, right? Look at this. There we go. Another medevac will be picked up for practically free, and MMA does manage to shut this one down, although even though it looked as if he was gonna be shut down immediately, Alive did definitely still get a lot of value out of this. And look at this, right? He's still setting small groups of units out on the map just to make sure that he is aware of whether or not there's any more hidden bases here for our meching Terran player. And how are you gonna move out? I mean, MMA is trying to make a bit of a move out right now. I don't think it's gonna happen. He is finishing up 2-2 right now, so there might actually be a chance for him to make a bit of a push across the map. I wouldn't necessarily mind that. Alive, though, eventually will end up losing that siege tank, and apparently the Marauder is now hanging out. But this is what is gonna happen. Alive is sort of, I guess in a way, like soft containing his opponent, right? With these continuous flybys into the main base, I mean, he already went for 2 really massive drops. It's gonna be difficult for MMA to make that decision to move out, because with Mech, you really don't want to be caught with your pens down, and because of that, look, MMA is forced to put a big chunk of his army inside of that main base just in case. Mech is very, very immobile. So that does mean that this 2-2 timing window here that MMA did have coming up is apparently basically deflected, and instead he's just simply going to sit back and try to defend the bases that he does have. That opens up the opportunity now for Alive to go for that 4th base already. Love the amount of Vikings that he's going for. There's always this interesting little meta game going on in TVT where both players are making a lot of siege tanks. Usually the one that gets air dominance gets not only to start transitioning towards liberators, but since siege tanks can shoot away further than they can actually see, it's really important to have that air dominance too. So apparently Alive, now that he's got his Viking count up to a very healthy number, not as many siege tanks though, he's now going to transition towards liberators instead, trying to prevent his opponent from getting that big economy out. MMA still positioning those Vikings close towards that missile turret ring. I love this. It's almost like playing Brood War right now. Anyways, at this point, Alive will also know, hey, wait a second, there's no 4th base to be seen anywhere. He doesn't necessarily need to move into this position here whatsoever. If there's no 4th CC landed at this location yet, Alive can just simply back up and mine off of his newly acquired base instead. Wonderfully played. Love the addition right now of Ravens 2. Anti-armor missile, while nerfed, is still an extremely valuable upgrade. Couple of Hellions now from MMA though, trying to see if they can get some kills once again. Looks like a lot of workers actually have gone down here in total. Although obviously both players can replace their workers with mules quite comfortably. This is still nicely done here on both fronts. Alive, just simply trying to be super safe here, right? He's going for a lot of expansions, and I like this, but I wouldn't actually mind it if he takes like another base or 2 here in just a second. I mean, the thing is, if you get a lot of production out, at some point you're gonna max out. There's not really a whole lot you can get out of this. I would love it if he actually just takes more and more bases on location. There we go. That's great. Yeah, there we go. He's going for the double expand. I think that's the correct call to make, because how are you gonna play if you're the bio-based, or how are you gonna be fighting those bases if you're the mech-based player, right? It's going to be very difficult to shut this down, and sure, the maxed out army is going to be powerful, but if your opponent never really gets there, I guess it's not much of an issue either. MMA now coming in though with 2 Hellbats loaded up into that medevac. Looks like the Vikings there will just barely be able to force these units away, and they're going to land inside of that natural instead. Clutch defense here by MMA, or rather by Alive, but it does look like he manages to deflect these units with barely any losses whatsoever. Alive is now the one who's maxed out. Here's the thing though, this bio-based force, while maxed out, isn't weak by any stretch of the imagination. And I think actually the Raven is going to be absolutely critical here, because the zoning that Liberators can provide is absolutely phenomenal. But regardless, this is an army that you kind of do want to trade semi-cost efficiently. So mining-wise, Alive is going to be very far ahead. He's going to have a lot more income, in particular once these bases turn into orbitals, and I love that he's making them on location. However, trading with this army is going to be tricky. Look at this. MMA now stationed up with the planetary fortress. He's got some Thors here as well in that high impact mode already, but there are the Liberators. They're going to try and see if they can deal some damage. Now, this is actually absolutely going to... Well, actually, you know, hold up. You know what? Like, this is going to all come down to the anti-armor missiles. If the anti-armor missiles can land on these Vikings, they're very easy to pick up. Viking numbers currently in favor just just barely of our player in blue, but obviously those Thors on the ground help out a lot. There we go, anti-armor missile moving forward. He's desperately trying to go for the split. He doesn't quite get that. That means that all of a sudden, Alive is going to be able to zone away with these Vikings a little bit better and then inch forward with the Liberators. This is such a difficult matchup to play. Look, these siege tanks and these Hellbats are just barely on the edge of the liberation zones. That means 2 of them on siege. Move forward just a little bit more, but as long as this anti-armor missile is upright, it's very difficult to make the move forward. Another anti-armor missile does go down, and while the missile itself doesn't deal a lot of damage, there's no denying that it is great for zoning this army away. Planetary Fortress definitely helping out. Unsieging all of those Liberators right now is Alive. He's gonna inch forward once again and really focus on all of those Thors. Couple of Widow Mines trying to see if they can deal some damage as well. There is the Digging Claws on them, so they'll be able to tunnel on the ground very easily. But this is the kind of trading that I'm talking about. Beautiful execution here by Alive. Sure, he doesn't need to win the game right here, and I would be very surprised if he manages to do so. But he's essentially like soft containing his opponent, because how are you gonna expend off of this, right? While this is all going on, look at this. MMA is fighting against a Terran player who now gets to drop 1 billion mules in the bottom right-hand corner. 6 bases taken here for Alive, and actually make that a 7th command center here too. No planetaries for Alive. That means he's just mining more than his opponent. And while these fights aren't necessarily super cost efficient, let's have a look at, what's the hotkey for that actually? Oh, I think it's actually not activated in this version of the replay. Now, we can sadly not really see that very confidently at all, but you can notice right here that while a lot of units have gone down here, it's actually slightly in favor of Alive, getting a lot of value here out of the biological army that he's got. Such an interesting dynamic, right? So MMA did manage to get to that max out state. I kind of feel like he really needs to start adding on maybe some of his own Ravens here too. I think that would be super helpful to have. Alive desperately trying to find an angle for the Liberator. Looks like he will be able to find one. This is just gonna buy a little bit of time. Another one of those Hellions now actually moving over towards the bottom right-hand corner. Little engagements are going on everywhere. And while a lot of workers have gone down in total in the game, I feel like it's mostly about the... You know, we can talk about all of the little details, but I really feel like it's mostly about the strategic advantage that Alive seems to have at this point. Plus, another thing that we have to keep in mind, with the new maps going up, there's also the addition of a Marauder buff, right? Marauders now essentially are better against mechanical units, or armored units rather. And the majority of this army here from MMA is going to be armored, right? That's going to be a very interesting thing to point out as well. I wonder if that means that Bio is going to be, you know, even better. Bio was never any weak. It did seem like, oh, here we go once again, though. Oh, man, the army immediately stemming forward upon realizing that the majority of those tanks from MMA are not sieged up. Alive is going to stem forward and pick them off with relative ease as well. MMA caught out on the map with his pens down. He's now trying to secure another base as well, but I've got a feeling that that one will not go up anytime soon. Stemming forward now, trying to go after that planetary fortress. Looks like Alive, though, may just barely be overextending, as the Thors and the siege tank there in the back, as well as the mass repair on the planetary fortress will force those units back. But here we go. The next wave of liberation zones is coming up. Now, at this point, Alive is ahead when it comes to the Viking count. Looks like he's doing a good job so far, though. Alive, that is, just simply getting rid of the majority of those Vikings. And while Alive isn't in the easiest position here, he once again managed to continue that soft contain by making it so that the command center cannot land on position. So it looks like Alive's strategy right now, right, is just to simply take in the entire side of the map. I mean, if we sort of like draw a cross diagonal dissection, right, through the diagonal of this map from top left to bottom right, you can see that he's taken basically every base on his side, and he's not gonna slow down. He's just trying to make it so that MMA can no longer mine his bases. Now let's have a look at the minerals. Main base, mined out. Natural, mined out. Third base, starting to run low. That means that the fourth is one of the lost mining bases. Alive, whenever he's maxed out, seems to be making a bit of a push forward, and he's doing a phenomenal job just simply controlling this army. Now, actually not going for a lot of Vikings anymore, instead just focusing on a lot more Liberators instead. MMA finally getting his own Ravens out as well, looking for that anti-armor missile. I love the dynamic, though, between all of the units. It's so complicated. I hope I'm doing a good job explaining to you why this is such a difficult thing to control. Alive making a very high-level move there, and I love this. That was a great decision, right? Instead of standing and fighting, he decided to go back. Very nicely done. He recognized, you know what? MMA's army is strong. It's got that 333 research, very, very powerful. It's going to be able to make short work of my army. Instead, I'm just going to simply evacuate the base in the bottom right and allow him that 5th, but then cycle towards the northern end of the map. So a couple of Hellions made their way towards the bottom right-hand corner. The army of MMA now, though, stuck at that 4th base location. That means that the Bioforce, which is significantly more mobile, is going to stim forward, pick up a couple of units, and then likely get out of there once again as well. Great split off right there at the last second as well by Alive, really showing us why he is the current established pro. Really making sure that his units are in the perfect position at the perfect time. Once again, I love this cheeky play by Alive. Veining the retreat, showing that on the scan's confirmation as well, but then coming back as soon as the scan runs out. Missile turrets are pretty much, or center towers rather, are basically covering the entirety of the map. And this is what you can do if you're the bio-based player, right? I mean, this center tower is going to be difficult to pick up. You just threaten these run-bys continuously. Now, MMA did secure the base here, right next to the main. This is going to be his 5th command center. Very critical that he keeps this one up and running. One Liberator still trying to be a bit of a nuisance. Apparently that missile turret did not finish. But once again, Alive is now close to maxing out, and it looks like he wants to see if he can potentially deal some damage. 2 Ravens there, picked off for practically free. Great liberation zones though, really zoning away this army, and with all of the pushes, right, near that 3rd base location of MMA, apparently the majority of the Terran army was now caught with its pants down, but MMA is pushing this back. Nicely done by him. I like these Widow Mines in the con position. Really nicely done. Going for that like medevac Widow Mine style, it's really nicely done. Still though, it's going to be difficult to make that push across the map, because as soon as MMA decides to pack up all of his units and make a move for it, you can bet your ass that there's gonna be either a Doom Drop in the main base or like a Stim Drown, you know, the 3rd base location. There's gonna be units coming from every angle. So making the move out is gonna be difficult, but MMA's maxed out army is gonna be substantially more powerful. I wonder if that means that at some point we're gonna be seeing that Brood War-esque transition, right? From Bio into Mech. Because if you could have the benefits of Bio play and then transition towards that late game style of Mech, I do think there's a lot of potential for that. Calling it right now, I feel like that's going to be, with my limited knowledge of TVT, I feel like that's going to be the standard in like a couple of years' time. Once again, though, the Hellions now making their way towards the bottom right-hand corner. They finally do get a very solid amount of worker kills there. 39 kills on those workers by Alive, but MMA definitely catching up when it comes to that number. MMA's army is slowly growing, though, right? Now, he did take, you know, one engagement here that I really wasn't all too fond of, and then the earlier one where he did not have the splitting on the Vikings to prevent the anti-armor missiles. Wasn't too fond of that engagement either. MMA, though, looks like he is going to be able to max out now for what is likely going to be the 3rd time. Now, remember, maxing out is not going to be the only part of this game. It all comes down to positional play as well. So he has now secured another command center. I would love it if he decides to take this one over here. One Hellion scouting out whether or not the base in the top left-hand corner is taken. Now, Alive, though, he's been happily sitting on all of those workers. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of SCVs, relatively speaking, but he's got so many mules and he can scan indefinitely. Like, this orbital base can just simply be, you know, mined out with just a bunch of mules, pretty straightforwardly. Another base will now be secured, though, by MMA, and this is going to be a very difficult position. Actually, he needs to grab this base. This base is going to be absolutely critical. A lot of anti-armor missiles are coming up here immediately, shutting down the majority of those units. The majority of the bio army now also stimming forward. They will be replaced very, very easily. A whole lot of siege tanks were picked off for practically free, and MMA will not be able to keep this base up here, I don't think. It doesn't look like that will be the case. One siege tank, though, trying to deal some damage from the high ground. Vikings now showing us how powerful they can be. Planetary will not go up, it will not finish, and that means that Alive picks up another base. Very critical move there, actually, because right now the bases of MMA are running really low. Yeah, he's essentially sitting on like one base and a little bit. And apparently, oh my god, beautifully done there by Alive. Apparently, MMA realizes that while his goal was to max out, he sees that basically every single base in the top left-hand corner and the bottom right-hand corner and every other one on a life side of the map has been taken, and he realizes that he's been chipped apart and chipped away at for the entirety of the game. So apparently, in Bio versus Mech, it looks like Bio is currently king, but it's gonna be interesting to see how that dynamic of Terran versus Terran keeps on developing. I mean, it really does feel like chess in a lot of ways. Positional play, trying to outsmart your opponent, the position that you hold on the board, obviously, the continued drop harass as well. There's so many cool aspects to TVT. Probably my favorite mirror matchup. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed watching this video. If you did, make sure you hit that like button down below. And if you want to see more, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you get a notification as soon as I upload more. Special shout out to the Patreon supporters. Thank you guys so much for directly supporting the channel. But for now, I want to thank you for watching. Have an amazing day. Do not forget to smile, and I will see you in the next one.